At 2 a.m., when the world outside was quiet and the streetlights outside his small apartment flickered like tired fireflies, single dad Ryan Hale slept lightly, the way men sleep when life never gives them enough time to rest. His 7-year-old daughter, Mia, slept curled against him, her small hands gripping his shirt tightly, the way she had ever since her mother's death 2 years ago. She hated the dark, hated the silence, hated when her father wasn't beside her. Tonight she had pressed herself so close he could feel her heartbeat against his ribs. Ryan's own exhaustion weighed on him like a heavy blanket. He had worked a double shift at the auto shop, came home close to midnight, cooked dinner for Mia, helped her finish her school project, and tucked her in before collapsing beside her because she refused to sleep alone. But when the phone buzzed once, he ignored it. When it buzzed again, he frowned. But when it buzzed the third time, long and sharp, his eyes snapped open. Ryan blinked in the dark, careful not to wake Mia, and reached for his phone on the nightstand. Unknown number. His tired mind told him to ignore it. No one important called him this late. No one needed him this late. But something inside nudged him. Maybe worry, maybe instinct, maybe the old habit he had from caring too much even when life treated him too little. He slid his thumb across the screen. Hello? For a moment he heard nothing. Just static. Then a woman's voice, broken, terrified, shaking, whispered, "Please, are you close? I need help. Please hurry." Before Ryan could even reply, the line died. The phone beeped twice as the call ended. Ryan sat up slowly, heart pounding, staring at the screen as if it might explain itself. The room felt colder. Mia shifted against him, hugging her stuffed bunny tighter. Ryan's first thought was that it was a wrong number. Someone desperate calling the wrong person. It happened sometimes in life, people dialed numbers fast when panicking. But the voice, that voice wasn't panic. It was fear, deep fear. The kind of fear that reminded him of the night Mia's mother had collapsed in his arms. The kind of fear someone feels when time is running out. He rubbed a hand over his face, trying to shake the feeling. He should go back to sleep. He had work in 4 hours. He had to drop Mia at school. He had bills. He had a life that never allowed extra decisions. But then his phone buzzed again. A text. A single pin location. No message. Just a pin. Ryan stared at it, debating with himself. He wasn't a policeman. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a hero. He was just a father trying to survive. But he also wasn't the kind of man who ignored someone begging for help. "Dad?" Mia whispered sleepily, eyes barely open. Ryan looked at her soft face, the innocence she carried, the love she gave him even on his worst days. He kissed her forehead gently. "Stay asleep, baby girl. I'll be right back." She murmured something and cuddled into the blanket. Ryan stood up, put on his old jacket with torn threads near the sleeves, and quietly left the room. He knocked lightly on his trusted neighbor's door, an old lady who adored Mia like a granddaughter. When she opened it and sleepily nodded at him, he simply said, "Emergency. Can you watch her for a bit?" She nodded again, motioning for him to hurry. Within minutes, Ryan was in his truck, following the pin on his GPS. The roads were empty, the sky dark, the wind cold. As he drove, the location pulled him farther away from his side of town. Crossing through better neighborhoods, richer areas, carefully designed streets, until he entered a gated HOA community where even the air felt controlled. The houses were enormous, each with manicured lawns, glowing security lights, and signs that said things like, "Quiet hours after 10 p.m., and no trespassing without HOA approval." Ryan swallowed hard. He didn't belong here. People like him, single dads with old trucks and grease under their nails, weren't welcome in places like this. But the voice in his head whispered again. Someone needed help. The pin stopped at a mansion with white pillars and a red door. Ryan hesitated, looking around. No movement, no people, no sign of trouble. Maybe it really was a wrong number. Maybe he should leave. But then he remembered the voice. Desperate. So he walked up the stairs and knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. Heavy footsteps approached the door. Ryan stepped back slightly. The door swung open and a tall man, maybe in his late 40s, stood in front of him. Hair neat, suit wrinkled from stress, eyes red as if he'd been crying or fighting sleep. Ryan recognized him instantly. Daniel Crest, powerful CEO, known across the city. A man so rich his decisions changed lives. What was Ryan doing here? Daniel looked at him strangely. Not angry, not suspicious, just surprised and relieved. "You came?" Daniel said in a low voice, as if those words carried meaning Ryan didn't understand. Before Ryan could answer, the man stepped aside. "Close the door behind you." Ryan froze. "Sir, I think—" "Close it." Daniel's voice dropped deeper, firmer. Ryan stepped inside carefully and shut the door. And then he saw her, the woman from the call, standing pale and trembling, clutching something wrapped in a towel, her hands shaking violently. Her eyes met Ryan's, full of terror, exhaustion, and something too painful to name. Ryan stepped closer slowly. "You called me?" She nodded weakly, unable to speak for a moment. Daniel stood behind her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. She dialed the last number she could. Every emergency service in this HOA is blocked after midnight unless they approve it. She panicked. She dialed random digits. Ryan frowned. "Why not call an ambulance?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "The HOA shut off our power. Cut the signal boosters. They're trying to force us to leave this neighborhood. And tonight, this happened." Ryan looked down at the towel. Faint movement. A soft, fragile sound. His stomach twisted. "What is that?" Elena, the woman, slowly opened the towel. Inside it was a newborn baby. So tiny, so red, struggling to breathe, gasping weakly in the cold air. Ryan's heart dropped. Every tired bone in his body woke up. Every fatherly instinct inside him roared awake. The baby made a soft, broken noise that sounded like life slipping away. Ryan stepped forward instantly. "We need to get them to a hospital now." Daniel shook his head with a hollow, helpless laugh. "We've tried." "Tried what?" Ryan demanded. "The gate won't open after 1 a.m., Elena whispered, voice trembling. "The HOA controls everything. They shut us in." Ryan stared at her in disbelief. "A baby is dying and they're blocking you from leaving?" Daniel nodded slowly, bitterness shaking in his voice. "Welcome to Crestwood Estates HOA." Ryan felt a cold rage rise inside him. He didn't know these people. He didn't belong here. He had come by accident. A wrong number, a wrong call. But as he looked at the baby, so tiny, so fragile, barely clinging to life, he knew he couldn't walk away. He couldn't pretend he hadn't seen this. He couldn't pretend this wasn't happening. A baby needed help. A mother needed help. A father needed help. And somehow, Ryan had become the only person who showed up. The baby made another soft cry and Elena broke into tears, holding the tiny body closer. Daniel swallowed hard, looking at Ryan with a seriousness that made the air heavy. "Ryan Hale," he said slowly, "you stepped into something far bigger than you think." Then he looked straight into Ryan's eyes and whispered the words that made the room feel even smaller, even darker, even more dangerous. "You're not leaving until this baby is safe." And as Ryan stared at the newborn struggling for air, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever nightmare this HOA controlled, he had just stepped into the center of it. The moment Ryan stepped fully inside the mansion, the door closing behind him with a quiet but heavy thud, he felt the air shift into something tense, suffocating, and wrong, like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible or miraculous to happen. Elena clutched the newborn tightly, her hands trembling so hard the towel shook around the fragile little body. Daniel stood close to her, his jaw clenched, fear and anger carved deeply into his face. But underneath that controlled exterior, Ryan could sense something else. A desperation so sharp it almost bled through his voice. Ryan approached slowly, careful not to startle either of them. But his heart thudded painfully at the sight of the tiny infant gasping for breath, chest rising and falling like a weak flicker fighting against a storm. His hands instinctively lifted, wanting to help, wanting to stabilize, wanting to protect, the same way he did for Mia the first time she caught a fever so high he almost fainted from fear. How long has the baby been like this? Ryan asked quietly, his voice soft yet urgent. Elena swallowed hard, her eyes glossing with tears. Since midnight, the power went out at exactly 12:01. The incubator shut down. He couldn't breathe properly. Ryan's heart clenched. And you didn't leave earlier? Daniel stepped forward then, his voice breaking for the first time. We tried. Elena ran to the gate carrying him. I drove the car behind her. He shook his head in disbelief. But the HOA guards blocked the exit. They said leaving during quiet hours would disturb the community peace. Ryan couldn't believe what he was hearing. A newborn was dying, and they stopped you? Daniel's laugh was hollow, humorless, full of rage. They didn't even look at him. They said rules are rules. Elena hugged the baby closer, whispering, I kept calling numbers until you picked up. Ryan felt the weight of her words hit him like a punch to the chest. He wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to get involved in the affairs of a wealthy HOA neighborhood, wasn't supposed to be standing in a mansion at 2:20 a.m. watching a baby fight for air. But fate didn't care about supposed to. The baby suddenly let out a soft, broken whimper, and Ryan's whole body jumped at the sound. Instinct took over. Let me hold him, Ryan said gently, stretching his arms out. I'll keep him warm while we figure out the next move. Elena hesitated for a moment. Motherly fear, motherly instinct. But then she saw the steady calm in Ryan's eyes, the sincerity, the urgency, the father inside him. She nodded slowly and placed the baby into Ryan's arms. The fragile weight settled against his chest like a dying star. Ryan adjusted his grip instinctively, supporting the tiny head, wrapping the towel tighter. The baby's skin felt ice cold, too cold. Earlier, exhaustion had sat heavy in Ryan's bones, but now every cell of his body jolted awake with protective fire. He rocked gently, allowing the baby to hear his heartbeat. You're okay. You're okay. Stay awake. Stay with us. The baby calmed for a moment, tiny fingers curling into the fabric of Ryan's jacket. Elena pressed her hand over her mouth, tears spilling as she watched a stranger hold her child with more tenderness than many people who claimed to care. Daniel watched too, and for a second admiration flickered through his fear. Ryan, you don't have to stay, Daniel said, though his voice sounded more like hope than suggestion. You didn't sign up for this. Ryan didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the newborn. I'm here now. That's enough. Daniel swallowed, emotion tightening his voice. Thank you. But Ryan shook his head. Save it. We need to move fast. He looked up sharply. Is there any backup power? The HOA cut it, Daniel said through clenched teeth. They think if our baby dies, we'll leave the neighborhood quietly. They want our house. Ryan's jaw tightened in fury. That's not just cruel, he said quietly. That's evil. Elena nodded, clutching her arms around herself. Every time we complain, they fine us. When we objected to their demands, they threatened to take our home. Ryan glanced between the couple. So this isn't just power games? Daniel shook his head slowly. No, they want us gone. And tonight, they saw the perfect chance. Ryan looked at the baby's breathing. Still weak, still shaky. They didn't have time. We need to get out. Now. Before they could react, headlights flashed through the window. Someone was outside. Elena gasped. Daniel's hand curled into a fist. Ryan stepped toward the window carefully and peered outside through a gap in the curtain. A black SUV sat in front of the house. Headlights off. Engine silent. No movement inside. But Ryan felt eyes watching them. Is that HOA security? Ryan asked in a whisper. Daniel nodded. Their night team. They circle houses they want to keep trapped. Ryan couldn't believe this level of control. They're monitoring you like you're prisoners. Daniel looked away, ashamed and angry. We've been trapped for months. Ryan turned toward Elena. Why didn't you call the police? Daniel answered instead, voice hollow. Police won't step into HOA internal disputes unless there's clear violence. And the HOA claims we're faking emergencies to get sympathy. Ryan clenched his teeth. He understood fear. He understood helplessness. He understood fighting alone. But this kind of cruelty lit something inside him he hadn't felt in years. "I'm not letting this baby die because of some power-hungry HOA leader," Ryan said, voice steady but burning. The baby whined again, little chest collapsing inward too far, too fast. Ryan felt panic shoot through him. "We're running out of time." Elena broke down fully then, sobbing quietly. "Please, help us. We didn't know who to call. We didn't know if anyone would come." Ryan stepped close, lowering his voice, still rocking the newborn gently. "You got me, and I'm not leaving." Daniel exhaled shakily, nodding once. "Then we need a way out." "Back door?" Ryan asked. "Covered by cameras," Daniel replied. "Garage. Blocked by HOA locks. Windows. Sensors trigger alarms." Ryan cursed under his breath. Everything was locked tight. It was a perfect trap. Suddenly a loud bang echoed from outside, the sound of something hitting their mailbox hard. Elena jumped and clutched Daniel's arm. Daniel's face darkened. "They're warning us. They want us to panic." Ryan looked at him. "What do they want tonight?" Daniel stared at him with haunted eyes. "They want us to lose the baby. They want us too broken to fight back." Ryan shook his head fiercely. "Then we fight." He tightened his grip on the newborn, who let out a tiny, fragile cry. "For him," Ryan murmured, his voice breaking. "We fight for him tonight." Elena wiped her tears, nodding. Daniel straightened slightly, gathering courage from Ryan's certainty. "What's the plan?" Ryan took a deep breath, thinking fast, eyes scanning the mansion. "First, keep this baby warm. Second, find a way the HOA doesn't expect." Daniel frowned. "Like what?" Ryan looked up at the ceiling, his eyes narrowing. "The attic. Do you have one?" Daniel blinked. "Yes." "Does it connect to the roof?" Daniel nodded slowly. "There's an emergency maintenance hatch." Ryan felt his pulse quicken. "Then we use it." Daniel stared. "Ryan, that's dangerous." "Not more dangerous than staying here," Ryan replied, voice low but full of fire. He looked at the baby again. "He needs help. Now." And as Ryan stepped toward the stairs, holding the newborn against his chest like a fragile miracle, Daniel and Elena followed him. Because somewhere in that moment, a stranger who arrived by accident had become the only person willing to save their child. And this was only the beginning of the night that would expose the darkest secret inside Crestwood Estates HOA. Ryan tightened his hold around the fragile newborn as he moved through the dark mansion hallway, every step echoing like a warning in the silent house. Elena walked close behind him, her hands pressed over her mouth to stop her trembling breaths, while Daniel kept glancing at the windows, fear obvious in the tightness of his jaw. The baby's soft cries had become weaker, each sound breaking more than just silence. Each sound cut through Ryan's chest like a blade carved from helplessness. He kept whispering softly, almost like a prayer. "Stay with me, little one. Stay awake. Stay strong." Every time the baby responded with the faintest movement, the faintest breath, Ryan's heart ached with a fear he hadn't felt since the night he held Mia in his arms after her mother's accident. He remembered shaking like this. He remembered begging life not to leave his child. And tonight, standing in a stranger's mansion inside a cruel HOA neighborhood, that memory became a fire pushing him forward. The stairs creaked under their feet as they climbed toward the upper floor. Daniel leaned in close, whispering in a tense, low voice. "We have to hurry. They check the house every 20 minutes. "They check your house at night?" Ryan whispered back, stunned. Daniel nodded. "They say it's security patrol, but really, it's surveillance." Ryan clenched his jaw. "This place is a prison, not a neighborhood." Daniel let out a bitter breath. Exactly. When they reached the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and cold, lined with family photos, smiling faces, vacation pictures, a life that seemed so perfect from the outside. But Ryan saw the truth now. This house wasn't perfect. This house was suffocating. Elena walked ahead and pushed open a small door that blended into the wall. Behind it, A narrow wooden ladder led up to the attic. She looked back at Ryan with fear swimming in her eyes. Can you climb while holding him? Ryan nodded quietly. I'll manage. I've held Mia on worse days. Elena placed her shaking hand on his arm briefly. Thank you. Thank you. Ryan didn't reply, but his eyes softened. He began climbing carefully, keeping the baby secured against his chest, using his other hand to grip the ladder. With every rung, he could feel the attic narrowing, the air thickening, the tension rising like a storm that refused to break. When he finally pushed open the attic panel, a rush of cold, dry air hit him. The attic was dark, dusty, and silent, except for the distant hum of HOA security vehicles patrolling outside. He heard Daniel and Elena climbing behind him. When they reached the top, Daniel moved past them toward the far corner of the attic. The maintenance hatch is here, he whispered, pushing a crate aside. A small metal square was screwed into the ceiling. Daniel reached up and twisted it until it opened with a quiet metallic click. Cold night air rushed in from the roof. Ryan lifted his head to check the space. The roof access wasn't big, just enough for a person to squeeze through. But beyond it lay freedom, fresh air, and maybe a path to the hospital. But as Ryan looked through the opening, he saw something that made his stomach twist. A security camera, pointed directly at the hatch. They monitor even this? Ryan whispered with disbelief. Daniel's face tightened with shame. They monitor everything. They control who leaves. When we tried to move last month, they followed us for 2 nights. Every time we packed bags, they showed up at the door. Ryan wasn't easily afraid. Life had beaten fear out of him long ago. But this level of control, this level of cruelty, it made even him feel cold inside. He lowered his voice. We need another way. Elena shook her head helplessly. There isn't one. Ryan looked around the attic, scanning every corner, every board, every possible path. Then his eyes fell on something. A faint glow leaking from a gap near the edge of the roof. He crawled toward it and saw it. An old ventilation duct leading out the side of the house. Daniel looked over his shoulder. Ryan, that duct is too narrow. Ryan shook his head. Not for the baby. Elena gasped softly. But he'd be alone for a second. He wouldn't, Ryan said quickly. I'll go out first, clear the way, and you pass him to me. We'll go down the side of the house. No cameras face that direction. It's the blind spot. Daniel hesitated. But the duct could be cold or dusty or... Ryan turned to face him, voice firm but gentle. He won't survive if we stay here. That silence afterward was heavy, painful, suffocating. Elena broke it first. Let's do it. Ryan carefully removed the towel from around the baby, just enough to keep him warm but narrow enough to slide through the duct. The baby whimpered, and Ryan felt a knot form in his throat. Shoo, I know, I'm sorry, but I promise I'm right here. Daniel unscrewed the rusted duct cover while Ryan positioned himself near the opening. He swung his legs down first, gripping the edge tightly as he slid out onto the side of the roof. The tiles were cold under his hands. The air was sharp and biting. He lowered himself slowly, his boots finding grip on the narrow ledge beneath the gutter. He looked back up at the duct opening. Okay, pass him. Elena's hands shook violently as she lowered the newborn toward the opening. Her tears dripped onto the baby's blanket. Please take him. I've got him, Ryan whispered, reaching up with steady hands. The moment Ryan touched the baby again, the child let out a soft, broken cry, as if sensing safety, even in the freezing air, even in danger. Ryan held him close, tucking him securely inside his jacket, keeping his body warm with his own heat. You're okay? You're okay. I've got you? Elena covered her face, sobbing into Daniel's shoulder. Daniel's voice cracked. Ryan, go. We'll follow after you. Ryan nodded and began slowly moving along the roof's edge, supporting himself with one hand while keeping the baby pressed safely against his chest. Every step felt like walking over a cliff. One slip and he wouldn't just fall. He'd fail the tiny life he had sworn in his heart to save. But Ryan didn't slip. Life had taught him balance in harder ways. Climbing narrow beams at construction sites, walking tight spaces during repairs, holding Mia while stepping over obstacles. He moved with the kind of determination only a father understood. When he reached the lower edge of the roof, he crouched and jumped down silently, landing on soft grass. He exhaled shakily, looking at the baby. "We made it, we're outside, we're close." But before he could call Elena and Daniel to follow, a flashlight beam swept across the lawn. A guard. Right there. Not 20 feet away. Ryan dropped instantly behind a shrub, holding the baby tightly, pressing the towel gently over his tiny head to keep him quiet. His heart hammered so loudly he feared the guard might hear it. The guard paused, turning the light slowly, scanning. Ryan held his breath. The baby whimpered. Ryan gently rocked him, whispering into the towel, "Please, please, stay quiet, please." The guard stepped closer. Ryan's muscles tensed. If he was caught, everything was over. But then, a loud slam echoed from the other side of the house. Daniel had thrown something, maybe a trash bin, to distract the guard. The guard muttered angrily and moved toward the noise. Ryan closed his eyes in relief. "Thank you, Daniel," he breathed softly. Now was the moment. Ryan crawled low, hugging the shadows, moving toward the outer fence. His lungs burned. His arms ached. His hands shook. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not while the fragile heartbeat against his chest kept reminding him why he was here. Finally, he reached the fence. Tall, metal, cruel-looking. But at the bottom corner, Ryan saw it. An opening where the metal had rusted, just wide enough for a baby-sized miracle. Without thinking twice, he slid the baby through gently. "I'm right behind you. I promise." Then he squeezed himself through the metal gap, scraping his arm painfully but not caring. Because the moment he stood up on the other side, it happened. The baby stopped crying. The baby breathed easier. The baby's body relaxed. Ryan froze, staring at the tiny face in shock. You're getting better." And then he realized something terrifying. The outside air wasn't healing the child. They were simply dying slower. They still needed a hospital. And fast. Daniel and Elena burst through the fence gap seconds later, breathless, terrified, trembling, yet relieved. "Ryan!" Elena ran straight to him, grabbing the baby, kissing his forehead, checking his breathing. The baby whimpered weakly but wasn't fading as fast as before. Daniel looked at Ryan with gratitude so raw it hurt to see. "You did it. You got him out." Ryan shook his head slowly, voice tight. "We're not safe yet." And as the three of them began running across the dark street toward Ryan's truck, the HOA alarm finally went off. Lights snapped on. Gates locked down. Security vehicles roared to life. And Crestwood Estates prepared for war. The moment the HOA alarm wailed through the silent neighborhood, the entire world around Ryan, Daniel, and Elena seemed to freeze. Not in calm, but in a terrifying stillness before a storm. The baby whimpered weakly in Elena's arms, his tiny breaths uneven, his small chest rising with painful effort as Elena held him close, tears spilling silently onto his blanket. Daniel grabbed his wife's shoulder, voice shaking. "We have to move now." Ryan didn't waste a second. He sprinted toward his truck, heart pounding, lungs burning, every instinct screaming at him to protect the fragile life in Elena's arms. The cold night pressed against them, and the HOA streetlights flickered sharply, illuminating the pristine houses that suddenly felt like silent enemies watching their every step. Ryan reached the truck first and yanked the door open. "Elena, get in the back seat. Keep the baby warm." "Daniel, front." Elena hurried to the back, sliding in with trembling hands. The baby let out a soft whine, and Ryan's chest tightened in fear. He had to move fast, faster than he ever had in his life. Daniel climbed into the front seat just as Ryan turned the ignition. The truck roared to life, but before Ryan could reverse, he saw two black SUVs appear at the end of the street, headlights off, engines rumbling like beasts waiting for the kill. Ryan exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel. "They're blocking the exit," Daniel whispered. horror in his eyes. Ryan's jaw tightened. The other side. There's a back road. He hit the gas. The truck shot forward, tires screeching against the perfect HOA pavement. Elena held the baby tight, whispering prayers under her breath, her voice cracking every second. Stay with me? Please, stay with me. The baby's tiny mouth opened in a weak cry. Ryan's heart hammered like it might break his ribs. Hold him close, he called, voice tense. We'll get him to a doctor. I swear we will. But he hadn't realized just how deep the HOA's control ran. Because as they turned down the next street, another black SUV appeared. Then another. And another. 4 vehicles now. All without lights. All without sound. All closing in. Daniel looked at Ryan, panic rising. How are there so many? Ryan shook his head. This wasn't about noise. This wasn't about rules. They were waiting for us. The truck sped forward, but every time they reached another crossroad, another HOA vehicle emerged like a shadow rising from the dark. Ryan felt sweat on his palms, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't. The baby's breaths were getting weaker. Time was slipping like water through his fingers. Ryan, what do we do? Elena cried, voice breaking. They're everywhere. Please don't stop, please. Ryan's eyes scanned every driveway, every curb, every open path. He spotted a narrow walking trail between 2 houses. Gravel, trees, narrow enough that the SUVs couldn't follow. Hold on, Ryan shouted. He jerked the wheel hard. The truck slid sideways before correcting and shooting down the walking path. Branches scraped the sides. Gravel flew behind them. Daniel broke into a panicked whisper. This path isn't meant for cars. But it's meant for people, Ryan said, eyes sharp. And right now, that's all we are. A bunch of people trying to save a child. The SUV tires screeched behind them as the HOA vehicles tried to follow but failed. The path was too narrow, too tight, too wild. The truck bounced violently, and Elena cried out, holding the baby even closer. Please, please, don't let him get hurt. Ryan steadied the truck, forcing every bounce under control, whispering silently in his mind for just a little more time. A little more strength, a little more luck. They shot out of the walking path into an open park area behind the HOA. Grass stretched out like a quiet field whispering hope, and beyond it, a small service gate that led to the main road. Ryan sped toward it, adrenaline surging. We just have to break through that gate, he whispered, and we're out. But just as hope flickered inside him, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the gate. HOA President Margaret Hale, the woman who controlled everything. Ryan hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Elena froze. Margaret stood calmly, wearing a silk night robe, hair tied perfectly as if she wasn't standing in the cold at 3 a.m. controlling people's lives. She held a flashlight in one hand and a clipboard in the other, because she never went anywhere without her rule book. She smiled. A smile colder than ice, sharper than glass. Good morning, she said softly, tapping her pen against the clipboard. You're breaking 5 HOA regulations right now. Ryan stepped out of the truck slowly, every muscle tense, every vein burning with anger. Move, he said through clenched teeth. There's a baby dying inside this truck. Margaret raised an eyebrow. That baby shouldn't be here, she said calmly. This neighborhood has rules, and those rules must be followed. A child without HOA registration is not permitted to reside within the community. Elena gasped loudly. Daniel stepped forward, shouting, You're insane. It's a newborn. He needs a hospital. Margaret sighed as if annoyed. If you just signed the compliance papers, we wouldn't be in this mess. Ryan's mind snapped. This wasn't HOA control. This wasn't safety or peace. This was pure evil disguised as regulation. He took one step toward her. She raised her hand sharply. 3 HOA guards emerged from behind the bushes, each wearing dark uniforms and earpieces, blocking the gate. You cannot leave, Margaret said. Not without my approval. Ryan's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Move, he growled again. This child needs help. Margaret walked closer, unafraid, looking directly into Ryan's eyes. And you think you will decide that? You? A mechanic from outside this world. Ryan didn't blink. I'm a father, he said quietly, dangerously. And I know what a dying child looks like. Something flickered in Margaret's eyes. Annoyance? Fear? Anger? She looked past Ryan at Daniel and Elena. I told you both months ago. Give up the house, sign the transfer papers, and everything will be peaceful. Daniel shook his head, voice cracking. So this is your peace? Letting a baby die. Margaret smiled again, cold, patient, cruel. Mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes help people make better decisions. Ryan felt the world tilt with fury. The baby cried weakly from inside the truck. Elena sobbed. Daniel clenched his fists. Ryan took a deep breath, stepped closer to Margaret until only inches separated them, and whispered with quiet fire, You are not God. You are not law. You are not going to kill that baby. Margaret leaned in, whispering back, Watch me. That was the moment Ryan's patience shattered. He moved before he could think, swift, firm, focused. He grabbed Margaret's flashlight, broke it from her grip, and shoved her aside just hard enough to make her stumble. The guards came forward instantly, but Ryan wasn't alone anymore. Daniel stepped between them like a shield, roaring, You will not touch my family! And Elena, fragile, shaking, terrified Elena, stepped out of the truck holding the baby, tears streaming but voice steady as she screamed, Move! He can't breathe. Even the guards hesitated, because the baby's cry, small, broken, sounded like death knocking. Margaret's face twisted with fury. Stop them, she yelled. But Ryan had already made his choice. He rushed the gate. Daniel followed. Elena followed. And in one explosive moment, Ryan slammed his shoulder into the gate. Cracked. Daniel pushed with him. The gate tore open just enough. Elena squeezed through. Ryan guided her, supporting her, shielding her as if she were carrying Mia herself. The guards lunged, but Ryan yanked the gate wider, trapping one guard between the metal bars. Gio! He shouted. Run! Elena ran toward the main road, the baby's cries fading into the wind. Daniel stumbled behind her. Ryan followed last, turning back for one final glare at Margaret, who stood shaking with rage. This isn't over, she screamed. Ryan replied coldly, No, it's just starting. And the three of them disappeared into the night, toward the hospital, toward safety, toward truth, while behind them, the HOA mansion lights lit up one by one, as if the entire neighborhood had finally woken to war. Ryan drove like the night itself was chasing him, the truck engine roaring louder than his heartbeat, though his own heartbeat felt like it was thundering inside his ears. Elena sat in the back seat holding the baby so close it looked like she was trying to fuse him into her own body, her tears dripping steadily onto his blanket. Daniel stared fiercely through the windshield, his fists clenched tight, jaw grinding every second as he muttered, Just get us to the hospital? Please, just get us there? Streetlights flashed past them, each one briefly illuminating the baby's pale, cold face. With every flicker of light, Ryan could see how faint the baby's breathing had become, how fragile the spark of life looked inside that tiny chest. Stay with us? Ryan whispered under his breath, hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles had turned white. Stay with us, little one. Don't give up. But the baby wasn't crying anymore. He was almost silent, fighting for each breath like climbing a mountain with no air. That silence was more terrifying than any alarm, any guard, any HOA threat. Then, just when they thought they had escaped everything, just when the hospital sign appeared in the distance, a pair of blinding headlights swung into the road behind them. A black SUV, the same HOA vehicles. Ryan's stomach dropped. You've got to be joking, Daniel whispered. Elena let out a terrified gasp. How did they follow us? Ryan gritted his teeth. Because they were never trying to trap you in the neighborhood. Daniel? His voice tightened. They were trying to trap the baby. Daniel's head snapped toward Ryan. What are you talking about? Ryan didn't answer yet, couldn't answer because the SUV behind them accelerated suddenly. It rammed the back of the truck. Hard. The entire truck jolted. Elena screamed, tightening her grip around the baby. Daniel slammed his hand against the dashboard. They're trying to crash us. Ryan? They're trying to stop us from reaching the hospital. Ryan growled, "Hold on." He swerved into the next lane, trying to break away, but the SUV followed like a shadow attached to their bumper. Daniel clenched his fists, breathing harder. "Ryan, they're willing to kill us." "No," Ryan said quietly, eyes sharp. "They're willing to kill the baby." A heavy silence filled the truck. Elena began sobbing harder, shaking violently. Why? Why does she want him dead? And then Daniel finally broke. His voice cracked open like a wound that had been bleeding in silence for too long. "Because that baby isn't ours?" Ryan stared at him in the mirror. "What?" Daniel sucked in a trembling breath, unable to hide the pain in his eyes. "We told you he was our child." "But he isn't." Elena lifted her trembling face, tears streaming down. "We lied because we were scared. We didn't know if we could trust you. We didn't know who would help us." Ryan softened slightly, but fear spiked inside him. "Then whose baby is this?" Daniel hesitated for a heartbeat. One long, heavy heartbeat, before he whispered the truth like a confession that shattered the entire night. "He is Margaret Hale's grandson." Ryan felt his entire body freeze. Elena nodded desperately, sobbing harder. "Her daughter ran away years ago. She tried to escape the HOA and her mother's control. She got pregnant, went into hiding, begged us to protect her." Daniel swallowed, voice breaking. "She died giving birth. She begged us to take the baby, begged us not to let Margaret find him." Ryan finally understood. Every piece fell into place. The monitoring, the harassment, the blocked gates, the power cuts, the reason the HOA president, the woman who controlled this entire neighborhood like a kingdom, was willing to destroy everything. She wasn't just cruel. She wasn't just controlling. She was hiding a scandal so large that if it came out, she would lose all her power. And the only proof of that scandal, the only living evidence, was the baby lying weakly in Elena's arms. Daniel whispered, voice shaking, "If the baby dies, there is no evidence. No one ever learns what she did to her own daughter." Elena sobbed harder. "So she locked us inside, cut our power, blocked every emergency call. She's been waiting for him to die, waiting quietly." Ryan's throat tightened. Rage welled up inside him. Not cold, not logical, burning, like a blazing fire of every injustice he had ever seen in his life. "She doesn't get to decide who lives or dies," he whispered fiercely. "Not tonight." But the SUV behind them rammed the truck again, harder this time. The truck jerked violently. The baby let out a weak cry. Elena screamed. Ryan lost control for a split second, the truck swerving dangerously close to the ditch. He steadied it, breathing fast. "They're not stopping," Daniel whispered shakily. "They won't stop until they kill him." Ryan's eyes flashed. "Then we make them stop." He slammed the steering wheel right, sending the truck into an empty service road behind a construction site. The SUV followed instantly. Ryan accelerated, pushing the old truck harder than it had ever been pushed. "This truck has survived more beatings than they can give," Ryan muttered, tightening his jaw. "I built half of it myself." Daniel nodded, gripping the handle above the door. "We trust you." The SUV chased them through the construction site, dirt and dust flying into the air. Steel beams, cement bags, concrete walls. Ryan scanned everything, searching for an opening, anything to break the chase. The SUV gained speed behind them. 20 feet, 15 feet, 10 feet. Closer, closer. Ryan suddenly spotted an unfinished ramp, straight, steep, leading to a half-built concrete platform. An idea sparked in Ryan's mind. A risky, insane idea. But he didn't hesitate. "Hold tight," Ryan whispered. Elena screamed, "What are you doing?" "Saving him," Ryan said, and floored the gas. The truck shot up the ramp. The SUV followed blindly. Ryan reached the top, then swerved sharply into a narrow gap between two pillars, something the SUV was too wide to follow. The SUV tried to match the turn, but its side smashed into the pillar. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. The SUV flipped onto its side, skidding across the concrete. Sparks flew. Smoke rose. Ryan's truck shot out the other side of the construction skeleton. He drove toward the hospital lights glowing in the distance. So close now, almost within reach. Elena pressed her forehead to the baby, whispering, "We made it. We're almost there." Almost. But then the baby's tiny cry faded. His breath slowed. His body went limp in her arms. Ryan heard the silence. His heart stopped. Elena screamed, "He's not breathing." Ryan slammed the gas harder, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Hold on, little one. Hold on, please. Please hold on." And as they raced toward the hospital entrance, lights blurring, sirens in the distance, the night closing around them, Ryan felt the weight of the entire world in that tiny fading heartbeat. And he knew this baby's life was hanging by a thread thinner than air, and the real battle, the one against Margaret, against the HOA, against injustice, had only just begun. The truck screeched into the hospital driveway like a wounded animal fighting for its final breath, tires burning against the cement as Ryan brought it to a violent stop right at the emergency entrance. Before the engine had even fully died, Elena flung the back door open, her voice breaking into a scream that echoed across the empty night. "Help! Please! My baby, he's not breathing." Ryan jumped out of the driver's seat so fast he barely felt the ground under his feet. He ran around the truck, heart pounding like it was trying to escape his chest. When Elena placed the limp newborn into his arms, his hands trembled. Not from fear of the night anymore, but from the terror of losing this tiny life he had come to protect with every breath he had. The baby's chest barely moved. A faint flicker, a whisper of life, a dying candle in a hurricane. Ryan pressed the baby to his chest, rubbing his small back gently, whispering in a trembling voice, "Come on, breathe. Don't give up now, we're here. We made it. Just stay with me." Daniel banged on the hospital glass doors, yelling at the top of his lungs, "Open the door! Emergency!" The automatic doors opened slowly, too slowly, painfully slowly, and Ryan ran inside, clutching the newborn like he was carrying the entire world. Nurses rushed forward the moment they saw the tiny, blue-tinged face. One nurse gasped and immediately grabbed a medical cart. "How long has he been unresponsive?" "Not long," Ryan said, voice cracking. "Please, just save him." The nurses took the baby gently from Ryan's arms and ran down the hallway. Elena collapsed to her knees right there, sobbing uncontrollably, hands shaking against the cold hospital floor. Daniel dropped beside her, both arms wrapped around her as he whispered brokenly, "They'll save him. They'll save him. They have to." Ryan stood frozen for a moment, staring down the now empty hallway where the newborn disappeared behind swinging emergency doors. Something inside him felt like it cracked open. He had never felt such terror, not even when Mia had stopped breathing during her first high fever. He had never felt so helpless, so angry, so desperate. He leaned against the wall, covering his face with both hands, his breath unsteady, heart drowning in fear. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to tremble. Because up until now, he had been moving, running, fighting, reacting. But now he had nothing to fight except the fear crawling inside him. The fear that this tiny baby, whose life had already been stolen once by neglect and cruelty, might slip away again. Seconds stretched. Minutes dragged. The hospital hallway felt like a tunnel with no end. Ryan looked at Daniel and Elena, two parents in pain though the child wasn't biologically theirs, holding each other like even gravity couldn't keep them steady. Daniel's eyes found Ryan, full of gratitude and panic. If you hadn't come, if you hadn't picked up that call, he would have died. Ryan shook his head slowly. Don't say that. Not yet. Elena wiped her tears with shaking hands. Why is this happening? Why would someone do this to a baby? He never hurt anyone. He never even lived yet. Ryan crouched beside them, his voice soft but filled with fire. Because some people care more about power than life. Daniel nodded slowly, pain darkening his eyes. Margaret did this. She planned this. She wanted him gone before anyone knew. She didn't just want to hide a secret, Ryan whispered. She wanted to bury it. Daniel ran a hand over his face, voice breaking. Her daughter died begging us to save this child. If she had seen what her own mother is doing now. His voice trailed off because the pain was too sharp to finish. Ryan placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. She chose the right people to protect him. Elena cried harder. We tried. We tried so hard. But she controls everything. Ryan looked toward the ER doors again, tightening his jaw. Not anymore. Before they could say anything, the hospital lights flickered. A strange, unsettling flicker. Once, twice. Daniel's eyes widened. That only happens when... Ryan finished the sentence, voice low and dark. When someone's messing with the power. And then the hospital intercom crackled. A nurse's voice screamed down the hall. The generators just shut down. The NICU lost power. Elena screamed. Daniel froze. Ryan felt the blood drain from his face. No! Elena tried to run toward the emergency doors, but Ryan caught her, voice shaking. Elena, stop. You'll get hurt. My baby is in there, she screamed, fighting against his hold. But Ryan didn't stop her because he wanted to. He stopped her because at that moment the lights went fully black. The entire hospital drowned in darkness. Only moonlight spilled through the windows. Only silence followed. And then outside, pair of headlights, stopped, staring at the hospital entrance like watching prey. A black SUV. Oh, Margaret. Ryan felt rage explode inside him like wildfire. She shut down the hospital power, he whispered through clenched teeth. Daniel's breath hitched. She doesn't care about the baby dying. She cares about him living. Elena sobbed hysterically. She wants him dead. She wants the proof gone. She wants everything gone. Ryan looked at the dark hallway ahead. We need to move. Now. We can't go in. Daniel whispered. There's no lights, no machines, no staff. Nothing is working. Ryan's eyes sharpened. Exactly. That's why we go. Before they could argue, Ryan sprinted toward the ER doors, pushing them open with raw force. Daniel and Elena followed. Inside, nurses were using phone flashlights. Doctors shouted orders in chaos. But in the far corner, past beds, past curtains, past frightened voices, Ryan saw the small emergency room where the newborn lay. Inside were 3 nurses, panicking. One was doing chest compressions with tears running down her face. Come on, little one. Don't fade on us. Don't you fade? Elena's scream tore through the darkness. My baby. She ran in and collapsed beside the tiny body. Ryan rushed in, standing over the bed. The newborn's face was pale, limp, still. The line between life and death thinned into a fragile thread. A nurse whispered, "We need power, we need oxygen. We can't do this in the dark." Daniel grabbed Ryan's shirt, voice breaking into pieces. She killed him. She finally killed him. Ryan shook his head violently. No, we didn't come all this way for him to die here. He looked at the nurse. What do you need? Tell me. Anything. The nurse hesitated. A portable oxygen pump? But the backup room is locked. No power means no access. Ryan didn't blink. Where? The nurse pointed down the hall. Second door on the left. Ryan sprinted without another word. He reached the door, pulled on the handle. Locked. He threw his shoulder into it. Once, twice. The third time, the door cracked open. Inside, rows of emergency kits lined the shelves. He grabbed the portable oxygen pump and ran back to the baby. Here. The nurses attached the tube, placed the small mask over the baby's nose, and began squeezing the pump. 1, 2, 3. Ryan held the baby's tiny hand. Elena cried into Daniel's chest. The nurse repeated the motion, voice cracking. Come on, little one. Breathe. Breathe for us. And then a sound. A soft, faint inhale. The baby's chest lifted. Again and again. The nurse gasped. He's breathing? Elena screamed in pure relief, collapsing over the table. Daniel covered his face, crying silently. Ryan felt his legs weaken. He placed a hand over his eyes as tears burned hot scars down his cheeks. The newborn breathed. He lived. Against all evil. Against all cruelty. Against an HOA president who thought she could control life itself. But then, a shadow filled the ER doorway. A woman's silhouette. Calm. Cold. Poison. Margaret Hale. She stepped into the dark room, slow and confident. Her eyes fixed on the newborn breathing again. And she whispered, almost like a threat wrapped in silk, "I warned you. This ends tonight." Ryan stepped forward, teeth clenched, fists shaking. "No, it ends with you." And the final battle for truth began in the shadows of a powerless hospital. The emergency room was pitch black except for faint moonlight slipping in through the blinds, casting thin silver lines across the baby's tiny face. Nurses held flashlights in trembling hands, directing the dim light toward the newborn who was finally breathing, soft, weak breaths that sounded like hope fighting against the darkness. Elena was on her knees beside the hospital bed, her arms wrapped around the baby's tiny legs, tears falling without pause. Daniel stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other pressed against his mouth as if holding in the scream he'd been carrying the entire night. And Ryan stood between them and the doorway like a wall, unmovable, unbroken, unafraid. But then the air shifted. Slow, heavy, cold. A tall silhouette stepped into the room, her expensive robe trailing behind her like a shadow dripping poison. Margaret Hale, the HOA president who controlled homes, families, fears, now standing inside a powerless hospital as if she owned it too. She looked at the newborn lying on the table, then at Daniel, then at Elena, and her lips curved into a calm, cruel smile that froze the entire room. "I told you," she whispered softly, her voice cutting through the dark like ice sliding across glass. "This ends tonight." Elena let out a broken whisper. Please just let him live." Margaret tilted her head, almost pitying her. "This child was never meant to be here. He's a mistake, problem, a threat." Ryan felt a deep fire burn inside his chest, an anger he hadn't felt since the night he held Mia through her mother's last breath. He stepped forward slowly. "You're talking about a newborn baby." Margaret smirked. "A newborn who shouldn't exist." Daniel's voice cracked. "He is your grandson." Margaret's eyes filled with cold disgust. "That girl, my daughter, was a foolish child who made foolish choices. She ruined her life and ran away like a coward. And that," she pointed at the tiny baby, "is the last stain of her rebellion." Elena cried out, her voice shattering in the dark. "You let your own daughter die. She begged you for help and you turned your back." Margaret didn't blink. "She chose her path. I choose mine." Ryan shook his head slowly, his voice low and terrifyingly calm. "Your daughter died trying to escape you, and now you want to punish her baby." Margaret stepped closer, her posture tall and sharp. "That child carries her blood, a bloodline I want erased. If he lives, people will ask questions. Reporters will dig. Investigations will reopen. Everything I built, destroyed by a mistake." Ryan looked deep into her eyes. "He's not a mistake. He's a life." Margaret leaned in close, her whisper dripping venom. "Not for long." Something inside Ryan snapped. Not in anger, in resolve. He stepped closer, putting himself directly between Margaret and the bed. The room fell silent. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Move from my way." "No," Ryan said softly. "Not tonight. Not ever." Margaret's calm mask cracked, rage twisting her face. She motioned with her hand. Two HOA guards stepped inside the ER room. Dark uniforms, heavy boots, cold expressions. The nurses gasped. Elena screamed and crushed the baby closer. Daniel pushed Elena behind him, voice shaking. "Don't touch him." Margaret pointed toward the child. "Get the baby." Ryan stepped forward so fast the guards froze for a moment. His shadow towered over them in the dim light. "Take one more step," he whispered. And I promise you, I won't let you leave this room standing. One guard scoffed. He's just a mechanic. Ryan moved before he finished the sentence. He slammed the guard back against the ER wall, using the fear of a father who had been fighting for hours without rest, without food, without hope but full of pure fire. The second guard charged, but Daniel tackled him from the side with a roar he didn't know he had inside him. The two crashed into medical equipment. Nurses screamed. Flashlights fell. The ER drowned deeper in darkness. Ryan grabbed the first guard's collar. A dying baby, and you're helping this woman kill him? Does that look like law to you? The guard choked out. We follow orders. Not anymore, Ryan growled. He shoved him out of the room. The guard stumbled into the hallway. The second guard pushed Daniel down and ran toward Elena, but Ryan caught him by the back of his jacket and threw him across the floor. The guard slid and hit the far wall, groaning in pain. Elena clutched the baby, sobbing, Please stop. He just needs to breathe." Margaret stood frozen, shaken but still defiant, her perfect hair now messy, her cold mask cracking into something monstrous. "You have no right," she hissed. Ryan turned toward her, chest heaving. "No, you have no right." He stepped closer. "You controlled your daughter until she died. Now you want to control her child." Margaret pointed her trembling finger at him. "This is my neighborhood. My rules." "Not here," Ryan whispered. "Not tonight." Just then, hospital backup generators roared to life. Lights flickered on. Machines beeped. Nurses shouted in relief. Oxygen pumps whirred. And the baby cried. Loud, strong, alive. Elena collapsed over him, sobbing in joy. Daniel bowed his head, tears falling freely. Ryan closed his eyes, feeling a wave of relief break over him so strong he nearly fell. Margaret stared at the baby's cry like it was a weapon aimed at her entire empire. Her voice cracked. This ruins me." Ryan looked at her with steady eyes. "Good." Nurses rushed back into the room. Doctors sprinted in. A pediatric specialist took the baby gently from Elena. "He's stable now. We've got him." Ryan let out a long breath he'd been holding for minutes. But the night wasn't done yet. Police sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Daniel whispered, "Finally! Someone we can trust." Margaret's face turned pale. She looked around desperately, like a cornered animal. "You can't do this. You can't expose me. I'm the HOA president." Ryan stepped closer, voice steady. "You were." Past tense. Police entered the ER with calm authority. Officers took one look at the crying baby, the broken guards, the shaking parents, and the cold-eyed woman in silk. "Ma'am," an officer said firmly, "you're under arrest for obstruction of emergency care, child endangerment, power tampering, and unlawful detainment." Margaret's scream tore through the hospital as the officers grabbed her wrists. "No, you can't do this to me. You don't understand. I built that neighborhood." Ryan stepped close, voice low and final. "And you almost destroyed a life." Margaret tried to lunge at him, but the officers dragged her out. Her screams faded down the hallway. The ER went silent except for the baby's strong, steady cries. Ryan finally turned around. Elena hugged him suddenly, crying into his chest, whispering, Thank you for saving him." Daniel gripped Ryan's shoulder. "You're the reason he's alive. We owe you everything." Ryan shook his head, tears forming in his own eyes. I just didn't want to see another child die." The doctor approached them, smiling gently. "He's stable. He's safe now. He'll live." Elena collapsed into Daniel's arms. Ryan let out a shaky laugh of relief, wiping his eyes. The doctor added softly, "What's the baby's name?" Daniel and Elena looked at each other, then at Ryan. Elena whispered, "We didn't name him yet." Daniel looked at Ryan with grateful eyes. "But now we know." Elena nodded softly. "We'll name him Hale." Ryan froze. "After you," Daniel said. "After the man who picked up a wrong call and gave our son a new life." Ryan looked at the baby through the glass window, crying, alive, safe. And he felt something warm in his chest. Something like purpose. Something like healing. Something like fate. That night, a single dad saved a child not his own. That night, a wrong call became the right miracle. And that night, in a cold hospital room, a tiny baby finally took his first real breath. Free from the HOA, free from fear, free because one man refused to walk away.